Hello, this is an assessment for reconditioning a Broadwood upright piano, 118 centimeters tall, made in between 1905 and 1910. Looking at the casework, the polish is in reasonable condition. It needs making good. I wouldn't say it needs repolishing. There's a little bit missing here, you can see down there. The other side is fine. We'd have to check the other side's not coming off as well, but this needs re-gluing. You see the inside here, as having said it's not faded, the inside here is actually faded, not faded, whereas the rest of the piano is. So it's been kept closed for a long time. That would be the same colour otherwise. But it looks quite integral like that. Interesting enough, Broadwood grounds are black here on the fall anyway, so it made me think it was not natural, because Broadwoods tend to be like that. But that's definitely been kept closed, I think. I doubt that it was darker. So you can see here it's some scuffing, and the top is pretty good on the whole. Looking at the other side is also quite reasonable. So it's dried out a bit here. Obviously can repolish the whole piano if you want that done, and that will turn out beautiful rosewood, as it's rosewood. It's nice the way the name's done on Broadwood. I've always appreciated that. It's several really beautiful design features. Now the cloth on the back of the piano has been torn, almost completely torn off. Probably best to take it off, because it's a dust cloth. The days when they didn't have vacuum cleaners, there's lots of dust on it, but it can obviously take all that off, and we wouldn't normally put a dust cloth back on, which we can do if you want one put on, but not that necessary these days. Now, the top of the fall is integral with the rest of the piano, so it's just the inside. The desk is perhaps slightly darker, but that's not really a problem. You'll notice here it's naturally fitted so that it keeps the top lid open a bit. That's an interesting design feature. And by the way, the desk is about the same height as the grand piano, about I think 95 centimeters from the floor, whereas most uprights have lower desks than that. A lot of desks and modern pianos tend to have the desks underneath the name here, or perhaps just above the name, but they're still quite a lot lower. Looking inside the piano, we can see it's a straight strung. A lot of Bechsteins and Bluthers are straight strung too. The idea is you get a better damping here, where there's no crossover point where the dampings aren't so good. And in fact, the break point here is much higher up. They haven't got the normal bass treble break point here, which you have, or say there, but it's further up in the middle of the piano, and there's a slight harshness on the left hand side as you get different tones on where the break is, but it's only slight. It's quite well in tune, but it's very flat, tuned with itself rather, but it's very flat. These dampers are lifting off extremely early. Well, I've got all these things written on the worksheet, so I'm not going to spend too long. The tapes are reasonable, but if we want to lubricate here, which it needs, we might have to take the tapes off, in which case we'd find they were taking them off. The option that lubricant can possibly be reached without taking the tape off, but the lubricant for the jack, well, that's something I should discuss in an email for the client. Now this is broken. I found that Broadwoods, very often when you try and bend the back check, they actually don't like that, and they tend to break, so that's got to be repaired. Something we can easily do, and we're going to be careful. You can bend any of the back checks. They're made to be bent, but on Broadwoods they tend to do that. I don't know if you're in the trade and like to comment on that. Otherwise, the hammers need refacing. They're a bit on the soft side. You can see how much they're worn. At some stage it was obviously played quite a lot. There's one that's been replaced here. Let's have a listen to it. Well, that one's very soft. That's the one next to it. So it's a case for refacing there to get more even tone, and on that one particularly, it's maybe the way it's hitting the string. Yeah, so well, it's got quite indented. It's not loose at all. If you can see at the end where they don't look, they look as though they lost all their grooves. That means the hammers are usually loose, but none of them seem to be. So that's amazing for the age of the piano. It's very well designed. These Broadwoods are. You can see a lot of rust on the string here, and it's very flat. But from experience, if you lubricate here, take the string down and back up again, it's very unlikely to break any. And if they do break in the treble, then you can use the same string by winding some off here, winding down, taking back on here. None of that's happened so far, so you don't have to replace the string, because two strings share the same pin at the bottom. So if you look down the hitch pin here, you can see that the string goes down and back up again, so it's being shared. So you can just wind some down off one of these, wind it round the pin and back up on the other, as long as there's enough coil at the top, which there will be. So that's important to know, really, because replacing the string, never quite get the same tone as the old ones, and once it's been done, it shouldn't break again. As I say, I'm not expecting any breakages on this being pitch raised, even though it's very rusty. From experience, that won't happen. We had to set one of the pins here. It was a bit on the loose side, so I think probably some of them might be slightly on the loose side, and looks as though one or two might have been set before. That's an issue. We could restring the piano, as it's in the workshop, it could be done. That's a possibility, though original strings on Broadwoods are very beautiful sounding, so you lose a bit of the tone if you do that. If we're trying to restore this to resell it, unfortunately Broadwoods don't really fetch enough, and it's very sad, that, because there's some very good pianos, but it's difficult for us to do that and make a profit. It's good to see the tuning record there with different tuners. I know most of those names. They're Oxford names, so that's interesting. Obviously an Oxford piano. And there's no moth in the piano, by the way. You can see here this one's been worn a bit more than the rest. You have to adjust these screws if you want to take the keys up, and they've been adjusted before quite a bit. So we'll have a think about how we're going to do the regulation on this, but there is quite a lot. The dampers were bad, and that's affecting it quite a lot. Taking the action out and putting it back in, I did notice there was a tape broken. Let's just move these forward, and one of them didn't go. This one here is broken, so I think replacing the tapes is necessary. And anyway, I mentioned if we want to lubricate, we really want to replace the tapes. Notice it's got a spring that you have on a lot of Bechstein upright pianos. Exactly the same idea, to try and get the jack to go under quicker, which is, the action certainly feels beautiful on these Broadwoods. It's one of the best features. There's the broken bit I mentioned before. When you put the action back in on these, when they have these screws instead of capstans, it's a bit of a nuisance, because as you put the action back in, they tend to fold over, and you've got to take the keys out, put them back in, otherwise you'll find that, I'll show you how you can feel that. It's difficult to get this back on. There we are, and this next one here, you can see all that slack, and that's because this is folded over. Though there is some slack on some of the keys anyway that we need taking up. So there's some slack, there's one that's slack, and the screw needs tightening a bit. So I think these screws are put on to produce rather than capstans, so that the action can come down a bit, make a lower piano. It's a bit of a nuisance for technicians, I think. If you're a technician, perhaps you say, no, I'm quite used to that. But it's harder to regulate in a way. There's another one that needs doing. Let's get that right as well. There we are. I think that's all of them now. So you see there is some slack in the action as well. I found this inside the piano, which looks like an original sale label. It's number 8A. If you're familiar with that, I wondered if it was a model of Broadwood. Be very grateful if you could let us know. There's a summary of the inspection. I've mentioned most of this. Very flat, 426. That's extremely flat. So could be pitch raised, and I don't think we break any strings. If you did it, it wouldn't be a bass, I shouldn't think. It would be a treble, which we can easily repair. So I recommend taking it up to concert pitch. Legroom 65, but pedals 9 centimeters. That's really, really high. Although there is enough legroom to cope with that, because legroom is normally 61. So it's a possibility of taking the casters off, I would suggest, and then replacing them with gliders, which is just as good for carpet, really. Well, it's better. So there's a summary. I don't know if I missed anything else. I don't think so. Lots of regulation too. The dampers are very early. That does affect the touch a lot. And last of all, as always, the weights on the keys. 50 grams, and the bass is pretty good. 62 though, there we have. And lubricating, I mentioned here lubricating the balance rail. That will even them out a lot. I don't know if we'll have to even them out anymore, but we can do that. We can get this close to a touch of a new piano, so you could practice on this quite happily. The action is excellent on these old Broadwoods, so you can see a summary of the work that we need to do there. Thank you very much for listening. I'm just going to play the piano briefly. So the Broadwood upright piano, 118 centimeters tall, made in between 1905 and 1910. 85 note keyboard, I didn't mention that. Lots of these old keyboards are, but you can certainly learn the piano on an 85 note keyboard. And the touch can be perfected to make it play roughly similar, very similar to a new piano. It has a beautiful touch. And very sweet sounding pianos. I've got a soft spot for these pianos, they're just so well made. The tuning pins are beginning to get a bit loose, and you might want to consider restringing it, but obviously it's expensive. You certainly wouldn't recoup it if you tried to sell the piano. In fact, if you sell it, it's really difficult to get sensible money for it, considering it's as good as a Bechstein, I would say, definitely, and but just not got the same name. So even without reconditioning it, it's pleasant to play, but it'll certainly be a lot more pleasant once it's been reconditioned. I hope that's been useful. If you've got a Broadwood piano and you want it restored, then that's something we could do. As I say, the expense of restoring it obviously takes a certain number of hours, and we will charge for the hours taken. Won't be recouped if you try to resell the piano. But if you want it to keep it as a family piano, or you just like the sound, then it's a very good idea to do it. Hopefully the Broadwoods will go up in value as time goes on, especially as we're trying to promote them and trying to say how good they are.